Why are there not more stories of grown-ups using drugs? The full spectrum of drugs that we're talking about. Why isn't there? So we talked offline about Joe Rogan. He's somebody who started smoking weed later in life, which is an interesting story. Like when he's already very successful, and he has a very interesting way of describing his experience with weed that it was like enhancing his productivity. It actually, I think he says like it increases anxiety a little bit in a way that was productive, like paranoia, not anxiety. And so that's an interesting story of an adult talking about the use of weed for productivity purposes. But you don't get those stories very often. Why?
I think fear. People are afraid that they will be belittled, dismissed, all of these things as a drug addict or some negative thing. But cannabis is lightweight. Come on,
Yeah.
you can admit cannabis these days, and the fact that I don't know when Joe started, but if he did start later in life, that's cool. I mean, you are mature, developed. You have developed some responsibility skills, all of these kind of things. This is a good thing. You don't want people to engage in any kind of behaviors when they're young and immature that might put them in harm's way. And so we want people to be developed at least. I mean, whether it's being in a relationship with a partner, or whether it's driving an automobile, all of these things that can be potentially harmful, but extremely beneficial if you are responsible enough to handle them. You want people to be mature. So that's a good thing.
So how are you supposed to, like somebody like me, somebody like Joe, how are you supposed to understand what the dangers are, what the negative effects are? So you said automobile, relationships. I think I have a reasonably, it's crappy, but reasonable understanding of all the troubles I can get with in relationships and what things to avoid. Same thing with driving a car. I have no idea. I'm in the dark in terms of what are the things to be careful about, what to avoid with drug use when we're talking about the heavy drugs.
Have you ever drank alcohol?
Yes,
That's
I'm
drug
Russian.
use.
I know I drink a
Yeah.
lot, but I understand that because culturally I came up, I was taught a lot of like, this is what you don't do, and this is what you do.
Yeah.
This is when you drink a lot. I mean, you see the effects. You see there's a lot of negative examples. There's positive examples of social stimulant. There's examples of great artists using alcohol to sort of, I don't know, to help be the catalyst for that magic moment for all of that. I have some examples now, especially in America. The same with weed. More and more, you're starting to get a lot of stories on psychedelics of different kinds. There's psilocybin, where you have mushrooms or even MDMA used sort of positively. There's kind of like negative stories from the past about acid, about LSD being used ultimately for productive, like for productive ends, but it destroyed the person. That's kind of how the story goes. It was like a trade-off. You take it's like what is it? Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil to learn guitar. Like it's a trade-off. You could take the drug, you're gonna create some good stuff, but you have to pay for it. Those are the stories.
Yeah, that's some bullshit we tell children. Come on.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right. These fairy tales, these cautionary tales that we tell people, we have to grow up. That's what the book is about. Drug use for grown-ups. We tell people, Pinocchio, if you lie, your nose grows. Who believes that? Who believes that there are fairy tales? But that's exactly what these stories are. They're in the same vein as those kind of stories, as Pinocchio. Like you said, when you were learning about alcohol, you were told what to do, what not to do, so forth. The same can be true with MDMA, with cocaine, with heroin. The same is true because there are some times when there are some potential dangers that you should avoid. And I wrote about some of them. Certainly in my work, just throughout all of my writings, I talk about those kind of things, and other people talk about these things. The problem is that we're getting our education from bullshit sources, from people who believe in this kind of Pinocchio thing. And it just does not fit with the evidence. And the evidence we all publish in the scientific literature. All these things that I'm saying, it's there in the literature. I mean, at a place like Colombia, we give these drugs thousands of doses every year. Do you think we would be doing this? And we do this with research grants that's public, that's funded by the public, taxpayers' dollars. Do you think we would be allowed to do this if these drugs were so dangerous? It's just nonsense. I mean, and the drugs we're talking about, they are all approved for medical use somewhere in the world.
And the studies you conduct are basically asking what kinds of questions. So you take the full range of drugs you're talking about, from marijuana to psilocybin to MDMA to cocaine and heroin. What is the study looking at? Like what the actual experience, what the positive and negative effects of the experience on the drug are in the control conditions?
Yeah, so we did these kind of experiments with alcohol, nicotine, all these drugs, in order to have an empirical database to tell people exactly what these drugs do and what they don't do, the conditions under which the drugs will produce positive effects, the conditions under which the drugs were more likely to produce negative effects. All of this information is important for a society to know, and we do know, and that's why we're collecting the data. We're collecting the data to help us with treatment if someone is having problems with these data. Hopefully, we'll understand more about how to help them deal with their problems based on some of the research that we're doing.